Hello listeners, I am your speaker Casey, and as many of you may know, I am currently undertaking the Psychology of Coercive Control Master's course at Salford University. I hope that this course will make me more informed and better equipped for future projects and interviews on the podcast. In the meantime, I will be releasing renewed versions of older episodes with updates from previous guests. If you want to find out what I remember from the time of each interview and get in-depth updates from the guests, I've been writing blog posts as I go through older episodes and adding them to my website, cultvaultpodcast.com, which you can also find links to in the episode description. You can find links on my website for support on navigating recovery from cultic abuse, to learn more about how to help a loved one, or become more informed about the subject of cults and coercive control. My emails are still open, and I am carefully curating a list of guests to speak with once I am back to interviewing officially next year. You can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com if you'd like to get in touch. And now, on to today's updated episode.
One by one, Rock took all of the women in the commune as his wives. All the other marriages were announced annulled by Rock's declaration. The only woman he did not marry was Maurice Grenier, as she was legally married to husband Jacques years before they met Rock. He did marry Gabrielle Nadeau, and would occasionally carry her to his bed, but apparently never attempted to have sexual intercourse with the sick patient. Claude was silently heartbroken, as he had become to love Solange, the woman whom Rock had married him to. Even though it was a reluctant marriage at the time, Solange had become pregnant with Claude's child, but Rock repeatedly told them that they were a bad match for each other and that the marriage would not work out. Giselle would often wake in the night to hear Rock in bed with Chantal and Nicole, or hear stories of how Gabrielle Lavallee would perform fellatio on Rock, and then her face would be pushed away from him when she attempted to kiss him. He would tell her that she may masturbate herself or perform oral sex on him, that he will not penetrate her unless he wants her to bear his children. Giselle would often lay in bed crying and confused. The members would write adoring letters to Rock, some of which I will read out of the book I mentioned, Savage Messiah, which is written by Paul Kaler and Ross Laver. The first letter shown is Gabrielle Lavallee's letter to Rock. It reads, "Adored puppy and well-loved master, my heart is sliding next to your immense father's heart. You have brought a lot of peace to me. I am happy about the lovely family that you have formed and have allowed me to join. I thank you equally for the promise of better days. I feel very good being at your side, to be one of your children and to live simply but fully. It feels wonderful to realize we are all of one body that is not condemned to die. And before finishing, I would like to tell you again what I told you when I had the impression of losing my breath the other night. I am slime, I am less than nothing, and I beg your pardon for all the errors of my flesh. I love you, Pappy, and I will love you eternally. Thirster. P.S. Excuse my handwriting." Rock began consuming alcohol again and leaving behind his SDA vegetarian diet. He was living on Pepsi and potato chips, ordering women in the commune to have sex with local shopkeepers in return for cheese, milk, and meat. The group were also receiving around $1,400 combined in welfare each month, which they willingly handed over to Rock. At night, Rock would begin drunken sermons, keeping his followers awake. If any of them fell asleep, they would receive a beating from Rock using a 4-inch thick wooden club, hitting them in front of the rest of the group. When Maurice Grenier ate 2 pancakes without Rock's permission, being heavily pregnant at the time in 1978, Rock actually punched her over and over, breaking 2 of her ribs. Maurice and Jacques' baby, Samuel, was a target of Rock's from the minute he was born. He would often order the baby to sleep apart from his parents in a cold room. This part comes with a trigger warning around child abuse. When baby Samuel would cry, Jacques was ordered to strip the baby naked and roll him in the snow, causing his legs to turn purple and his penis to swell. If the group ever resisted, the punishments would grow in severity. When Rock was annoyed by the group, they would grovel in letters, saying things like, "I have a long way to go. Thank you, Pappy. I love you, Hogler." "Pappy, I must request your forgiveness for the squalling noise my child made while you were taking your bath. Please forgive me for having disturbed your bath. I love you, Rebecca." "Hello, my friend. I am writing to you this morning, first to ask your pardon for the hurt that I caused you by eating from another plate that you gave me. Secondly, I hope that you will take pity on your little group of people. I ask that you not hit with justice because we all would die. Please excuse me for having dared to write you to ask for these things. Nathan." Rock ordered Jacques at one point to cut off his wife's toes when she spoke about leaving the group. When Jacques refused, Rock called him a faggot and threatened to cut off all of her toes himself. Reluctantly, Jacques took the axe and proceeded to sever one of his wife's little toes. After this, Rock would begin using Jacques as his punishment enforcer, instructing him to carry out heinous acts of violence against the rest of the group in the name of God. Jacques would later talk about how if he didn't agree to do these things, Rock would do them himself, and the outcome would be much more severe. February the 17th, 1979, came and went without the end of the world occurring. Newspapers reported on how the so-called prophet Roch Thériault had lied about doomsday, much like the SDA had a number of times before him. Roch retorted with a simple explanation. There was a mix-up with the date because the heavenly timeline is different to ours. But he was insistent that the end was nigh. By this time, Quebec's Land and Forest Department was moving to have the group removed from that settlement, which had in fact been built on Crown land. 2 months after the birth of baby Samuel, Jacques and Roch would head into Quebec City to protest the eviction. Chantal Labry's parents were convinced their daughter would return and see through Roch when the end of the world did not come. But when this happened, and she didn't return home, they hired a lawyer to obtain a court order for Chantal to undergo another round of tests. On March 17, 1989, 2 police officers arrive at the Eternal Mountain to escort Chantal away, but Roch protests that they will have to kill him or bring an army before he would hand over his Ruth. Jacques Fossé soon proceeded to leave the commune at this time. Roch's increase in violence became too much to take, but Fossé would praise Roch in local newspaper articles. Despite his praises, 10 officers and a helicopter would reach the commune, take Chantal to a Quebec psychiatric facility, and issue an order for Roch to undergo further psychiatric tests himself. With Roch away from the commune for 30 days, the parents took advantage and swooped in to visit their children. Solange refused to speak with her parents and would not allow them to meet their grandchild. Her father was enraged. Soon Chantal Labry would walk free from her evaluations and headed straight back to the camp. What happens next comes with another trigger warning. Roch had returned to the camp after being deemed sane and was even awarded custody of his 2 sons from his first marriage, Roch Jr. and Francois. They had both come to join him and his followers on the compound. Their mother brought them along, and after witnessing the singing and dancing of the group, she laughed at their bizarre scene. Roch began to beat her heavily, and the other members of the commune just stood by and watched. Shortly after this, in November 1980, the commune would be joined by their newest member, Guy Vere. He was a runaway from a psychiatric unit and was looking for a group that would accept him. Roch ordered the commune's nurse, Gabrielle Lavallee, to perform a psychiatric test on Guy, which he passed. Early 1981, Roch said, "You can stay here if you sign this contract." The contract stated that Guy would be solely responsible for 3 of the children in the commune: Samuel and Miriam Gregier, aged 2 and 4, and Simon Olet, son of Solange and Claude. Roch's own children slept in the main building with him, as they were seen as special. The other children were seen as animals. One night when Guy was trying to sleep, Samuel would not stop crying. Eventually, Guy lost his temper and beat baby Samuel so severely that his face was completely swelled. He couldn't drink fluids through a straw. His head drooped to one side and he couldn't urinate. Roch ordered Gabrielle, the nurse, to take care of him, but when one of his testicles swelled up, Roch decided that he would fix the child himself by performing a circumcision on the boy. He used almost pure ethanol during the procedure and even forced the 2-year-old to drink some. Samuel would be dead by morning, with some speculation that he may have eventually died from alcohol poisoning. Maurice was working in the woods when she found out that her son had been killed, but she was so desensitized from everything at this point that she continued to just chop wood. One night during a drunken rage, Roch ordered his followers to participate in a trial where he would be judge and his followers would be jury. He put Guy Vere up on the stand about the death of Samuel. The group agreed that there shouldn't be punishment apart from exile. Roch ignored his followers and ordered the man to be castrated, and so he was. Roch, assisted by the others, carried out the operation. Soon, Guy would leave the camp and report what happened to the police, stating how his scrotum turned purple and bled for a week. The police soon raided the commune and found the remains of baby Samuel. On December 18th, Roch, Jacques, Maurice, Gabrielle and Guy were all found responsible for the death of Samuel. There were a total of 17 separate charges brought against the group, including neglect of the other children in the commune. During this time, the group moved to an old abandoned building to be closer to Roch throughout the trial period. All of the children were removed by Child Protective Services. Eventually, social workers would agree to let the children live with the families if they each agreed to move out and live independently of each other. This was done to encourage the hold the group had over itself to finally break. Roch and Jacques began a hunger strike during their trial period, and Roch had additional charges brought against him for previously threatening a police officer who was called to the commune after 3 loggers were roughed up by Jacques and Roch. Roch unsuccessfully tried to take the officer's gun and then ordered Jacques to point a rifle at him and shoot him if he tried to escape. 5 minutes later, he asked the officer if he was nervous before ordering Jacques to put the rifle away. Roch said that he meant all of these things and these threats as a joke. And his theatrics didn't stop there, as Roch fainted in court and was then given 2 30-day sentences to be served concurrently. Samuel's trial resulted in 6 members serving reduced sentences by changing their plea from not guilty to guilty, including Gabrielle, who was given 2 concurrent 9-month sentences for criminal negligence causing bodily harm to a child and the castration of Guy Vere. Guy Vere was acquitted of all charges by reason of insanity, and Jacques Guerre was given a 6-month prison term. Maurice Grenier was given a suspended sentence, and Claude Ouellette received a 6-month sentence for burning the body of Samuel in a crude attempt to cremate him. Solange Boillard received a suspended sentence, and the probation term stated that they could not meet or live together for 3 years unless for religious reasons or employment, which of course essentially voided any actual purpose that this probation term held. Roch received 2 one-year sentences, one for criminal negligence of a child and one for the castration of Guy Vere. This was to be served on top of his already concurrent 2 30-day sentences. After the publicised trial, Quebec Provincial burned Eternal Mountain to the ground and forced the commune to relocate permanently to the 4 separate apartments that they were living in Quebec, patiently waiting for Roch's return. Roch served 18 months and was fully released on October 1983. He violated his parole in less than 2 months and was sent back to jail in December 1983. The sole condition of his parole was to not enter any establishments where liquor was sold. He violated this after being spotted in a bar in New Carlisle by local police. In February 1984, Roch was fully released again. He rejoined his remaining 22 followers. At this point, there were 3 men, 9 women, and 10 children. Upon his arrival home, he had a new proclamation for his group. Giselle listened with concern as Roch announced that he and Jacques had purchased an entire forest for the group to move into, away from society and from the judging eyes of the public. At this point, again making decisions on his own, Roch convinces the followers to leave the Gaspé region of Quebec for good, and the group travel a massive 1,500 kilometres to the town of Burnt River, Ontario. When the group arrived in Burnt River, they found themselves in the middle of a dense woodland. They needed to rebuild from scratch. This included making several shelters, taking entire trees down, digging a well for water. 5 months after their arrival, the group were able to move out of their tents that they were sleeping in and into the new buildings, which were much more polished than the ones in their last commune, seeing as the members had built up some form of experience. Roch had drawn up a work list and assigned roles to each of the adults reflecting their status in the commune hierarchy. According to the book Savage Messiah, by this time Solange had become Roch's closest confidant. She kept the books and made sure that the chores were all done. She was the only wife allowed to enter Roch's sanctuary. Giselle, surrogate mother to all of the women, had become surrogate grandmother to all of the children of the commune. Chantal was Roch's personal chef, and she also washed and laid out his clothes daily. Nicole kept Roch's room spotlessly clean. Francine was Roch's masseuse and also bathed and showered him. She also prepared meals for the rest of the commune and ran the bakery. Josie was in charge of collecting firewood and keeping the stoves hot. Maurice was the only female driver and also Rock's hairdresser. Jacques and Claude carried out various laborious assignments for Rock. Gabrielle, in addition to nursing duties, worked in the garden and served as interpreter when others would visit the commune. The lowest of the low in Rock's eyes was Maurice Grenier, Jacques' wife. Rock ordered Maurice to live away from the camp with her 2 surviving children, and none were allowed to mix with the rest of the group, even at meal times. Eventually, Maurice's daughter reached an age where Rock thought it suitable for her to join the rest of the group. When the group would visit nearby towns to shop, the locals recalled how the wives seemed to worship Rock. They would take off his boots at arrival and change him into walking shoes. Another woman would put it on his jacket, and another woman would brush his beard. The Victoria County Social Services rejected the commune's request for welfare as they were seen as an institution and not a family, forcing members to travel to nearby towns of Kinmount and Fenelon Falls to shoplift items and goods. Rock told his followers that this was all God's will, so that the supplies were theirs and they had the permission from God to take them. Reports describe members wearing jackets with modified pockets sewn inside of them to make it the perfect way to shoplift. Soon, locals came together to ban the commune from shopping in these towns. Because Rock seemed to always need to be lining his pockets, and because food and resources were now scarce, Rock did something out of character. He encouraged his wives to each phone home, to phone the families he had turned them against, to contact the very people Rock had spent years convincing his followers were evil and not to be trusted. He told the wives to phone them every week until they donated money to the grandchildren for food and clothing. This was grandchildren they did not know the names of, grandchildren they had never met before. Luckily, the families realised the money would most likely go straight to Rock, and nobody ever handed any monetary support over to the commune. The soil in the commune turned out to be poor. It did not produce enough vegetables for winter, so the group tried selling crafts from an abandoned service station 25 kilometres from Burnt River. When this didn't work, Jacques and Claude would drive down to the Niagara Peninsula, Ontario's fruit belt, and bring back apples, strawberries, peaches and pears. The commune would then fan out to makeshift fruit stands around the area and sell fruit. This is where Rock gave his group the infamous name. He began calling his followers the Anthill Kids. Rock saw his group as a colony of worker ants contributing to the greater good. After a day of selling fruit, he would often summon one or more of his wives to his room. He would make love to one woman whilst the others massaged his shoulders. He encouraged rivalry between the women. This was not as bad as when Rock went on one of his drunken rampages and began using a hammer to hit women on the head. Maurice Lambert recalls having her head split open by Rock, who would then not allow her to attend hospital. So Chantal stitched Maurice's forehead with a needle and thread. One of his favourite punishments would be to make people lie on the floor while he urinated into their mouths. He even forced Gabrielle to lick someone's anus after they had defecated, and to smear this all over her cheeks and forehead. Jacques Gregier would stand up to Rock after one of these drunken episodes. This episode included beating, defecation and torture, and Jacques punched Rock so hard in the face he sent him flying. Rock held another court to punish Jacques. Rock dressed in a black tuxedo and told Jacques his punishment would be circumcision. It more closely resembled the head of his penis being removed by another member in the room. In 1984, Georgia Brown and the Children's Aid Society, or CAS, visited the commune and noticed how the women would not speak without given permission or a signal from Rock. Brown recalls how Rock had told her that he hoped the oldest of the girls, aged 9 at the time, might one day become one of his wives. When Brown asked how old she would need to be for this to happen, Rock just smiled and walked away. Brown recalls how the children only rarely tasted milk, cheese or any other dairy products, and every crumb Brown was shown during her visits was merely put out for show. After this encounter, Rock and his relationship with CAS grew worse. He insisted on being notified 2 days before CAS planned to visit, and Brown had a feeling that Rock was hiding something. And then, on January 26, 1985, at 9 a.m., in a light snowfall, wrapped up her 5-month-old baby boy in a blanket and left him in a metal wheelbarrow until 10:30 a.m. The temperature was 10 degrees Celsius, and even though an ambulance was called for the boy, Eliezer was pronounced dead when he arrived at Ross Memorial Hospital. The official cause of death was infant death syndrome. but this would later be reopened and re-examined to determine other causes of death. Rock often said that this baby boy had the mark of the devil as he had a droopy eye. Gabrielle saw what she did as an act of mercy to stop the 5-month-old from receiving constant beatings from Rock. Brown was supported by her supervisor, Evelyn Koski, who had heard of a non-profit group called COMA, Council on Mind Abuse. 2 of COMA's founders came to meet with Brown, and after hearing about life at the commune, they said, "It sounds like we have ourselves a cult." Over the next 2 years, Ian and Christine from COMA gave the CAS and Brown a crash course in cults and how they operate. In the book Savage Messiah, it is summarized this way. According to the Howarths, most cult recruits are young, middle-class, idealistic, and spiritually curious. Often they have experienced some kind of trauma, childhood abuse, separation from their families, the death of a loved one, or failure to achieve some important objective. Many seem to be searching for a new identity that will allow them to abandon their existing responsibilities and place all their emotional and physical needs in the hands of a self-appointed, charismatic leader. Psychiatrists call these potential converts seekers, people who are looking for some mystical or fantastic belief to fill up their lives. Cult leaders have no such doubts about their self-worth. They may have suffered at one time in their lives, but they have overcome their trials and are only too eager to share their profound insights with others. Behind the facade of humility lies supreme arrogance. Dynamic and blessed with a persuasive manner, a great leader can inspire profound allegiance to himself and his goals. The key to any cult is the effective use of mind control techniques. In other words, brainwashing. Usually it begins with an effort by the leader to separate his followers from familiar surroundings and outside influences. Then the recruits are subjected to a prolonged period of sensory bombardment to break down their defense mechanisms and create a state of intense suggestibility. Typically, that will include long hours of mental or physical exertion, sleep deprivation, lack of proper nutrition, the introduction of strange rituals, a group dress code, and the constant repetition of the leader's doctrine in flamboyant evangelical performances. By offering his followers to bear their most embarrassing or humiliating secrets before the rest of the group, and then exaggerating their sins, the leader reinforces the need for salvation. The aim of all of these techniques is to destroy the follower's ability to think critically. Under the right conditions, a subject can regress to a helpless, infantile state in a matter of days. With their minds wiped clean, they are ready to accept the leader's new values, no matter how absurd or destructive. The group is everything, the individual is nothing. Members believe that the ends justify the means and that they are above the law as long as their actions meet with the leader's approval. Loyalty is maintained by fear of outside forces that the leader proclaims as evil and dangerous, and fear of the leader himself, who often punishes his disciples savagely for the slightest negative thought, word, or deed. Believing in the leader's righteousness, his victims endure practically any torment, no matter how painful or degrading. According to the experts, the most dangerous cults have at their core a belief that current events are hurtling towards some kind of preordained apocalypse. There are only 2 kinds of people, the doomed sinners and the enlightened saints. Led by a messianic figure, the members of such cults see themselves as God's army, waging a war on the devil's agents. In that kind of life and death struggle, people can bring themselves to do almost anything. Rock was said to treat his followers using a Big Brother-style surveillance method. He would get them all to inform on one another. Perpetrators would be beaten, thrown into an icy lake and starved, whereas informers were rewarded with more food rations and boots that fit properly for labour. One day, Solange began bleeding heavily from her vagina at 8 months pregnant. Police got a call from a 2-way radio and sent a chopper. Later that day, Solange gave birth to her 3rd child in the hospital, but there was never a moment where there wasn't another commune member by her side. Meanwhile, Rock's drunken binges were taking a darker turn yet again. In June 1985, aircrafts picked up another distress call from a 2-way radio with a frantic voice screaming "Mayday, Mayday," and when the police came, they found Rock naked and drunk straddling a tree. He convinced other members to hide in the root cellar as the day of judgment was upon them. 2 weeks after this event, CAS were granted permission to make unannounced visits to the commune. By this time, there were 14 children and 2 more on the way. CAS reported how strange the visits were. The children never cried, none of them laughed, none of them ran to their mothers or competed for toys. They were totally under Rock's control. Later in the summer of 1985, several months pregnant, Giselle rounded up her son Jeremiah and told him that they were going on a picnic. Her secret plan was to escape with her son, but her son turned on her, telling Rock about her plan to run away with him. Rock had become a master at turning the children against their parents. So Rock ordered Jeremiah to punch his own mother, Giselle, in the face. When Jeremiah carried out this act, Giselle said her heart shattered. After a year of being forbidden from sleeping with her own husband, Jacques, Maurice Grenier, the only woman not to be a named wife of Rock, had enough and asked to leave the commune. Rock agreed, but only if she left one of her 3 surviving children at the commune, the one reaching puberty who was destined to be the next wife of Rock. It would take 8 months for Maurice to begin legal proceedings to get her daughter back. Maurice's testimony, however, would allow CAS to eventually go in and take all of the children out of the commune. All 14 children displayed varying forms of strange behaviour. The children ate with their hands, had black teeth, and described having to clean the sanitary napkins of other women at the commune, as well as being subjected to graphic sexual acts which include Rock and group masturbation, and being hurled into the lake or against a tree while being called devils by Rock. None of the women fought CAS to keep the children. They stared blankly as the kids were removed one by one. The children began to tell their foster families about sleep deprivation, where bells would ring in the night to keep them awake. They reported bizarre rituals of chanting to upside-down crosses. One little girl spoke of how she was given a baby goat to raise, feeding it with a baby bottle. Then one day she was ordered to sacrifice the goat. There was a ritualistic sacrificial group ceremony that happened. And then, using dolls, the youngest girl said she would need more dolls to show CAS what she wanted to say. Once she had a large collection, she showed CAS how the adults and children would all pile up together naked. She said the adults would lie on the ground and touch each other in funny ways. Then one day she was told to stroke Rock's penis until white stuff came out. She also described how the children were encouraged to explore sex acts with one another. Rock Jr. was believed to have had sexual relations with one of the younger girls and had requested sexual favours from at least 2 of his half-sisters. Rock had also forced Rock Jr. to masturbate Claude. To Rock, this was all normal. He would nail children's arms and legs to trees and have other kids throw knives and rocks at them. He was also reported to have held 2 babies over a fire pit and threatened to drop them in, saying he could do it easily if he wanted to. An independent assessment was ordered by Dr. Real Honeyot and Dr. Martin Malishkovich. They recommended in their 300-page report that the kids be returned immediately. They actually praised Rock's work around experimental attitude towards sex education. Judge Lucien Boulot cross-examined the report and found that the doctors had no standard techniques for covering abuse and made no attempt to ascertain how the natural parents were related to the children. Over 1985 and 1987, another 9 children would be born, swiftly discovered and taken into Canadian government. Rock took the removal of the children as a sign that he needed to hide his future children. Before he worked out a solution to this problem, there was a night where Rock got arrested. 2 of his wives were working as cleaners in a pub at the next town over. They were supposed to get paid at the end of their work, but when the owner wasn't there to pay them, Rock blocked the exits and wouldn't allow patrons to leave until his wives were paid. This resulted in police being called, and when the police attempted to get Rock into the vehicle, he began shouting about his heart. An ambulance was then called to check Rock over, but Rock refused to be checked and kept flexing his arm when the ambulance workers tried to take his blood pressure. Police put him in the vehicle, and he told them he was going to shit his pants. They advised him against doing this, but Rock proceeded to do so anyway. Police rolled the windows down, and when they arrived at the hospital, a stinking Rock was carried away to be looked at by doctors who pronounced him to be fit and healthy. Later on that year, the commune had a visitor. His name was Dr. Grossbeck. He had come all the way from Utah after hearing about Rock's trial with the children and after hearing about the commune. He was a psychiatrist, and when he arrived, Rock pulled out all of the stops to impress him. He had his wives massage the doctor. He laid out all the good food and they drank. Rock boasted about all of his wives, saying he had more than any man alive. The doctor began to inform him of Mormonism and the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, where polygamy was practiced. Rock became enthralled. He had never heard of a religion that specifically encouraged taking up many wives. Still, he was sure he had more than any man. The doctor told him of Alex Joseph, a shunned FLDS member who had more wives than Rock. Rock immediately arranged a visit to meet this Alex Joseph. Alex and Rock spent time together in Utah, discussing ideas and theology. When Alex discovered Rock had only officially married one of his wives, he urged Rock to make the commitment to the rest of his women official in the eyes of the Lord. Rock left Alex to fly back to Canada, full of ideas and motivation. However, the 21-month legal battle over the commune children had its effects on Rock. He began drinking more and continuing his evil ways. One day Claude was punished by being forced to wear an elastic band around his testicles until the morning. The next day his scrotum had swelled up to the size of an orange and turned purple and blue. Eventually it became infected. Claude tried to hide from a drunken Rock who wanted to perform a healing surgery. Eventually Rock figured out which outhouse Claude was hiding in and began ramming the Jeep into the building over and over until Rock came out and surrendered. Rock forced Claude to lie down on the floor and, using a razor blade, sliced open Claude's scrotum and plucked out the testicle. Then he cauterized the wound with a piece of red-hot iron. Claude recalls there being blood everywhere and that it was really painful to walk. During these peak times, various members of the commune would run away to hide from Rock's lashing out. Giselle became so accustomed to hiding out in the woods for days at a time that she had a stash of blankets that she kept for winter months. Some women ran to the local women's shelter, and often Giselle would return home to her parents before being coaxed by Rock to come back home. Eventually, she would. Rock would be on his best behaviour for a few weeks, but Giselle knew that her punishment was coming. One of those times, Rock threw a hunting knife across the room and sliced Giselle's leg open. Jacques tried to stop the bleeding by tying a towel around her leg, but a massive blood clot formed and her thigh swelled up to the size of a football. Giselle recalled the next moments in the Savage Messiah book. She says, when he did his doctor's work, he was just like a butcher. He was very rough with his patients. He took my leg and bent it, forcing the blood to shoot out from the cut. The pain was unbearable. Then he asked someone to get a file, similar to a large nail, and put it in the fire so it would get red hot. Everybody was holding me down. He stuck the file into my leg and I was screaming. I was trying to fight the others off, but Rock still wasn't satisfied. He boiled water for 20 minutes and asked Gabrielle to pour it onto the cut. She was shaking, and she wound up spilling 3 cups of boiling water onto my leg. The pain was so intense that I couldn't stop screaming. I passed out twice. When I came to, I couldn't recognize the people around me. It was as if I was in a concentration camp. By this time, Rock had made connections official with Alex in the FLDS. He used this polygamous connection to have the kids ushered away from the commune before they were removed by CAS. Alex named Rock the King of the Israelites, and soon Rock began wearing a crown and imperial robes. Rock's new status elevated his abuse of the commune members. He began doing gladiator games between the members based on sex or violence, and having punishments that included breaking fingers and toes, removing teeth and pubic hair, removing testicles, sitting on stoves, breaking knees with sledgehammers. The Savage Messiah book continues here to offer an extensive list of heinous acts that Rock committed. There was at the time he fired up the blowtorch, and while Gabrielle held Jose tight in her arms, passed the flame back and forth over Jose's back and shoulders, roasting the flesh until the skin bubbled up. There was the time he took the torch to Nicole's stomach on the day that she gave birth to her first child, a son. There was the time he smacked Jacques on the forehead with the blunt edge of an axe and smashed his ribs with a wooden club. There was the time he punched Rock Jr. in the face after he refused to fight with his brother Francois. There was the time he punched and kicked Nicole in the stomach, and she was 3 months pregnant. This caused her to abort. There was the time that he fired a .303 bullet through Nicole's right shoulder. There was the time he threw Giselle to the ground, kicked her in the head, and broke her ribs with steel-toe work boots. There was the time he held Claude's right foot in his hand and bent each of the toes backwards until they snapped. There was the time he grabbed a piece of broken glass and ran the sharp edge along Claude's arm from his shoulder to his arm, slicing it open. There was the time he took a pair of pliers and yanked 11 healthy teeth out of Claude's mouth. There was the time he ordered one of the women to strike Claude's leg twice with a sledgehammer, breaking it. There was the time he took a pair of vice grips and squeezed Gabrielle and Giselle's nipples until they bled. There was Jacques to tie Claude's hands and ankles together behind his back and hang him from a beam for an hour. There was the time he ordered several of his wives to pluck out every one of Claude's pubic hairs. There was the time he poured boiling water over Claude's shoulders and back. There was the time he picked Claude up and sat him down on a hot stove, searing his buttocks. There was the time he beat the commune's Belgian workhorse to death with chains and then ordered Claude to burn the carcass. There was the time he forced Claude to eat human excrement. There was the time he forced Claude to bite into a dead mouse as punishment for missing the rodent when he was cleaning the house. There was the time he punched Solange in the neck, knocking her unconscious. There was the time he fired a .22 bullet at Claude, grazing his scalp. There was the time he ordered Nicole and Chantal to hold Gabrielle down while Jacques pounded her right thigh with a sledgehammer. There was the time he placed Gabrielle's right hand in a vice and the sawmill and tightened it while she screamed. There was the time he lashed Gabrielle in the eye with his belt. There was the time he plunged a needle into Gabrielle's back, gave her an injection of an unknown solution, and twisted the needle until it snapped, leaving the broken tip embedded in her flesh. There was the time he burned Gabrielle's right breast with the welding torch and singed the hair around her vagina. There was the time he ordered Jacques to cut off half of the baby finger on Gabrielle's left hand with a pair of wire cutters. There was the time he fractured the fingers on both of Gabrielle's hands by smacking them with a board when she tried to defend herself from his punches. There was the time he forced Gabrielle to go outside naked in the winter, cut a hole in the ice of the frozen pond and jump in. There was the time he threw a knife at Francine, causing a 5-inch laceration on her left hip. There was the time he threw a knife at Maurice, penetrating her right foot. There was the time he slammed Solange on the floor when she was 6 months pregnant and broke her cheekbone with his fist. The catalogue of violence in the police files went on and on and on, and eventually in 1988 Solange fell violently ill. Roch became convinced that something was wrong with her liver and called for an operation on the bakery table. Roch attempted to give Solange an enema with molasses oil and water. He punched her repeatedly in the stomach and jammed a tube down her throat, instructing everyone to blow and suck on the tube. After removing a 4-inch piece of tissue from under her ribs, he ordered her a warm bath filled with sherry. After going to bed, Solange later died that night. Doctors revealed that she died from perionitis, a fatal result of the digestive fluids leaking into her abdominal cavity. Roch was not held accountable, but Roch also believed that he could still heal Solange. Immediately after her death, however, Roch did try to kill himself in various ways, including asking Jacques to shoot him, overdosing on Tylenol and drowning himself in the nearby lake. Roch decided that God wanted him to live, and after meeting with his friend, the doctor, they decided that he must be pregnant with Solange and that they could do a reverse birth. For days, Roch pranced around the commune saying, I'm pregnant with Solange. I must watch what I eat now and stop drinking. She is growing inside me. He returned to exhume Solange's body, covering her internal organs in vinegar to fend off the worms. A few days later, however, when decomposition truly set in, he ordered a hole be made in Solange's skull with a hand drill. Jacques complied and drilled this hole. Roch believed his semen could reverse birth and resurrect her, so he ejaculated into the hole. But this didn't work. Roch began drinking again, seemingly blowing off the idea that he was pregnant with Solange. Giselle convinced Roch to cremate her ashes as she wished. Gabrielle ordered the removal of one of Solange's ribs, which would later be kept in a leather wrapping around Roch's body. Others collected various bone fragments to keep for themselves. Roch kept a mason jar which he added bone fragments, semen and olive oil to in order to accomplish a reverse birth one day. After this difficult experience, Roch returned to Alex Joseph with 2 more of his children that he needed to get out of the commune before CAS got wind that they had been born. The 2 polygamists got into an argument about Roch's treatment of Solange's body. He is the first person to stand up to Roch in this way and tell him that the treatment of his wives is wrong. Giselle remembers looking at Alex's wives and realising that they seemed happy. None were beaten, none were spoken badly to, and none were thrown into an icy lake. If they wanted to spend the night with their husband, they just needed to make an appointment, and if the ladies wanted to say no, then they could. Giselle was in awe of this man who stood up to Roch. Roch left angry with his tail between his legs, but this event, alongside Solange's death, would mark the beginning of the end of the Anthill Kids. People began leaving the commune. José Pelletier left the commune in 1988, and Roch continued to dive deeper into madness. By July 26, 1989, Roch became so drunk and enraged that nearly all members slipped away into the forest. Gabrielle was not so lucky. Roch recalled that Gabrielle had a stiff pinky finger. He ordered her to place her hand on the kitchen table and brought a hunting knife down so hard on her hand that it pinned her to the table. This left her unable to move. She was slowly bleeding out, so Rock went to get another beer and waited 45 minutes before returning to Gabrielle. By this time, her arm had turned blue. Gabrielle remained conscious the entire time, and Rock tormented her, saying, "It's not so good looking, is it?" Rock used a carpet knife to cut between her elbow and the shoulder, but he was too drunk to finish the job. He ordered Chantal to do it, and after the bone was exposed, Rock returned with a dull meat cleaver and amputated her arm with 2 drunken swings. Gabrielle remained silent the entire time. The next day she escaped to the women's shelter, but is coaxed back by Jacques. Her arm is gangrenous by this point, and Rock cuts away the infected flesh with scissors, as well as part of her breast just for good measure. He then splits her head open with an axe. She escaped into the woods and passed out for almost 2 days. When Gabrielle woke up, she had insect eggs laid inside her head wound. She staggered back to the commune where Rock was still drunk. He was eager to heal her, so he got Jacques to use the blowtorch to remove a piece of the drive shaft from an old car. Once it was red hot, he pushed it against Gabrielle's stump to cauterize the wound. On August 16, 1989, Gabrielle escaped to a nearby hospital and an arrest warrant was put out for Rock for aggravated assault. The warrant took 3 days and Rock and the commune had all planned to leave. By the time police arrived at the commune, it was deserted. The story made national headlines and a massive manhunt began. On October 6th, Jacques was found and arrested. After 6 weeks on the run, Rock was found with Chantal and Nicole and 2 baby boys. All listed members were handed respective sentences for their involvement in Gabrielle's amputation. Jacques received a 5-year sentence, Chantal a 2-year sentence, and Nicole 18 months. Eventually, Solange's remains were found, and Rock received a first-degree murder charge on top of his 10-year charge for aggravated assault. All of his followers left the commune and began life away from Rock, apart from 3 devout followers. Chantal, Francine, and Nicole stayed close to the prison and visited Rock for conjugal visits. Prison officers regarded Rock as well-mannered and well-behaved. By this point, Solange's father was dead and her mother was living in a retirement home, but Rock sent a letter to Solange's sister that said this: "Giselle, dear madam, I understand very well the pain that I will cause you in reviving the memory of our sister Solange. But please believe my sincerity that I share this pain with you. You have all my sympathy. Since the death of Solange, a melancholy has impregnated itself in my being, plunging me often into a bath of tears. My love towards her is indescribable. Permit me, I beg you, to open myself up freely. What I will write to you is not meant to offer excuses or extract pity. It is the authentic account of a dramatic life in which love, religion, alcohol, and violence were mixed, forming an explosive existence. I am from a family in which I was mistreated and beaten worse than a dog from the age of 2 until 14, when my father, having beaten me, threw me out of the house and told me never to set foot in it again. This violence fermented in me until the age of 35. Then, finding myself under the dependence of a group of people that I kept around me at all times during all sorts of nonsense, I got caught up in my own trap. Under intense pressure, my violence blew up. I loved these people from my deepest self, yet ironically, it was on them that I allowed the offerings of my violence to descend. For years, I was a bestial brute, a barbarian. Concerning my illicit practice of medicine, I studied a classic college of the theories of Hippocrates. Afterwards, I studied this art by correspondence. I was employed by a paramedic team for 4 years. To continue, I will pursue the most delicate, sensitive, and emotional subject, Solange and myself. After Solange gave birth to Simon, a delivery which was long and painful, but with no major complications, Solange called me over to her. I went down on a bended knee next to her bed. She grabbed my head between her hands, held me tight to her breast, saying, "I can no longer hold myself back, and I must tell you something. I am madly in love with you." Solange is the wife that I loved above everything, and will love for the rest of my life. Solange had an extremely fragile health. In the Gaspé, she had pneumonia twice and nearly died. In the years after this, she fell 6 times into a state of hypothermia. You are free to find fault with my diagnosis, but Solange had cirrhosis of the liver, and this is an irrefutable fact. I knew that Solange had been an alcoholic, and she had remained one until her death. Forgive me for being so crude, but in certain circumstances you have to give expression to the true facts. I feel that you should know the truth of the events. In spite of the bestial brute that I was, I did not kill Solange. I practiced on her an operation which prompted her premature death. I am the only one responsible, and it makes me guilty in the face of justice. Therefore, next January 18th, I will present myself to the judicial tribunal to receive a sentence of 25 years. I would never accept that others be punished for what I voluntarily committed. I beg you to realize that I understand the large bruise that you carry around because of her disappearance. In the name of this simple and pure love that we have for one another, I will serve my sentence with dignity. I ask you to forgive me for all of the sufferings of the heart that I caused. There is something in my heart which I must ask you. In the name of Jean and your blood, which flows in part of the heart of my 3 little girls, can you please watch over them? I have absolutely no news of them for over 4 years. I don't know if I dare, but I wish madly that you will accept an invitation to visit me where I am incarcerated. I have a pressing need to reveal some confidences which Solange told me. If you wish to receive more information about this, please do not hesitate to call Francine Laflamme, your illegitimate brother-in-law, Roch. P.S. I have finally cut off my beard and hair, and I am ashamed that I have worn this garb for so many years. Roch died in 2011, and it is said that in total he fathered over 30 children.